English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. A Chinese ship has arrived in Venezuela to provide medical support. Chinese healthcare experts will provide assistance and will have an exchange knowledge with local experts as well. This is part of the 28 cooperation agreements President Nicolás Maduro signed with China during his most recent visit. The Peace Ark boat docked in the port of La Guaira.
They will be here for a week, taking care of patients of all nationalities. People have already shown their interest. The governor tells me that over 1,200 Colombians will be helped here.
Venezuelan People's Minister of Petroleum, Manuel Quevedo, is in Algeria to attend a meeting of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Quevedo says Venezuela wants to continue strengthening mechanisms to defend oil prices. His government is also aimed at promoting cooperation to guarantee stability in the oil market. President Nicolás Maduro met with ministers on Thursday to evaluate Venezuela's economic recovery plan. In a televised address, President Maduro called the advances made positive and meeting expectations. It's been a month since the plan was launched. Maduro said the new measures will safeguard the national currency and citizens' purchasing power. Our correspondent in Caracas has been out to see how people are dealing with the changes to the currency.
Here in the Venezuelan capital, people seem pleased with the first month of the new currency, the sovereign Bolívar. For this analyst, you can feel the difference in the streets.
I think there's more stability and more calm. The fact is that a month and a half or 2 months ago, with the old currency and the old wages, you could buy very little in the street. Now we can see in Sabana Grande and other parts of Caracas, there are more people out in the street. They are buying more, and the whole exchange of goods and services is more dynamic.
People point to the greater supply of cash and the increase in purchasing power.
Before it was chaos. They give you 10,000 bolivars maximum. We suffer from the lack of cash. You couldn't buy a bus fare. But now at least things are moving again.
Shops have adapted to the new money without difficulty.
The difference is we are going back to work like we did years ago. It's easier to deal with the money instead of talking about millions of bolivars. I think it's a lot easier.
The head of the China National Petroleum Company has been in Venezuela to sign agreements. China has backed the new economic measures.
People
are well informed about the economic recovery program, and they have a very positive opinion about it. We signed 28 agreements in China to increase oil production, which Venezuela needs so badly.
The agreements signed with the People's Republic of China included finance to double Venezuela's oil production by August next year, support for basic industries and new mining projects, improvements in the distribution of medicines, and the launching of a new telecom satellite, the Guaycaipura. The aim is to strengthen the economy and overcome the impact of the economic war that Venezuela has suffered for the last 5 years.
The Venezuelan and Turkish foreign ministers have been discussing closer relations in Caracas. The Turkish minister, Mevlut Cavusoglu, met Jorge Arreaza to prepare a series of political and cultural agreements. They include easing visa requirements between the two countries and cooperation in the training of diplomats. Turkey has already signed a number of economic development agreements with Venezuela. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, says the Trump administration is preparing a series of actions to increase pressure on Venezuela. Pompeo made this statement in an interview with Fox News on Friday. Venezuela has not yet commented on Pompeo's remarks, but it has always said that sanctions only hurt the Venezuelan people.
The United States anticipates processing up to 300.
U.S. intellectual and activist Noam Chomsky had visited former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva in Curitiba, where he is being held. Chomsky highlighted the importance of the coming election and said Lula should be rights to country's next president. He also said that he was pleased to see that Lula is lively, energetic, and optimistic about his future.
It's not every day that one meets one of the most significant figures of the 21st century and the person who, by rights, should be the next president of Brazil.
Chile insists it won't negotiate any part of its territory with Bolivia. This comes 10 days before the International Court of Justice in The Hague decides on Bolivia's demand to gain access to the Pacific. Foreign Minister Roberto Ampuero met with former foreign ministers to agree on a stand about this dispute. They all agreed Chile will keep the borders that were established in the 1904 treaty.
We share a diagnostic with all of Chile's former foreign ministers. Our sovereign territory is protected and won't be part of any negotiation.
Dialogue is the only option to end the dispute. Foreign Minister Diego Pari is confident his country has presented a solid case to the court in The Hague. Bolivia argues that Chile had not kept its diplomatic promises and obligations to negotiate sea access, namely a land corridor and port under its control.
We invite Chile, its authorities, the Chilean people, to sit down to dialogue, to sit down and find solutions that are beneficial to both countries, solutions that contribute to peace and brotherhood among the people of Chile and Bolivia.
At least 29 people, including women and children, have been killed during a military parade in Iran. 4 gunmen opened fire to the crowd in Ahvaz, in the southern state in Iran. Among the victims are also 12 members of the Revolutionary Guard. At least 57 people have been also wounded. Foreign Minister Mohammed Javad Zarif says the attack was carried out by, quote, terrorists recruited, trained, armed, and paid by a foreign regime. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility of the assault, occurred close to the border with Iraq. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has sent its condolences to Iran. Arreaza rejected the attack and said the Venezuelan people will pray for the victims. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Heavy rains have killed at least 3 people in Mexico and 3 others are reported missing. The northwestern city of Culiacán is the most affected. 11 municipalities are in emergency and some of them, like El Fuerte, are still inaccessible by road. The heavy torrential rains have left flooded streets and overflowing rivers.
The rain fell a very short time, contrary to what we expected. We were expecting torrential rains, but in a longer period of time, contrary of what actually happened.
At least 166 bodies have been discovered in a mass grave in Mexico. Experts are working at the site in the state of Veracruz to identify the remains. Meanwhile, relatives of missing family members hope to receive news of their loved ones. This is the latest mass grave found in a region hit by the bloody war on drugs that the country has carried since 2006.
My hope is to find him, just like any other mother. We are hoping to find our children alive. But if God's will is different, what can we do? We cannot do anything, so I've always said that what I want is to find him.
We continue in Mexico, where a journalist has been killed in the state of Chiapas. Mario Gomez was shot several times by 2 men riding a motorbike. He was a correspondent for the local newspaper El Heraldo de Chiapas and well known for denouncing violence. He's the 9th journalist to be killed in the country this year. Meanwhile, human rights activists have criticized the Mexican government for leaving them without protection among rising threats and violence.
Jorge Andrade's life has been threatened many times because of his work with undocumented migrants. Since 2014, he has approached the program for protecting human rights defenders and journalists at the government secretariat. But according to him, the program isn't sufficient to face the violence in the country.
The mechanism is only useful to protect us, the beneficiaries. but it doesn't do anything else. People who threaten or attack journalists or advocates are not arrested.
After 3 attacks, Julio Gomez signed up to the program. However, now the program doesn't have any funds, and its use is limited to advocates and journalists who have to leave their homes due to attacks or threats. The Enrique Peña administration's decision to cut their funds can have serious consequences for displaced journalists.
If we are sent home, it will mean death for me and my colleagues. Going back home is a suicide.
President Peña Nieto has pledged to support the program, which supports 727 human rights activists and journalists.
It looks like the state's policy is to hurt the cause of human rights. It's not only a scornful policy, but a contemptuous one. We have grades all over the country.
There has been a 60% reduction in the program's budget as compared to the $2.5 billion spent in 6 years on state advertising and presidential publicity.
This Peña Nieto's obscene expenditure is for him to show us, Mexican, a result that only exists in his imagination, or in something similar to what his administration was.
During the last 5 years, Mexico has been declared one of the most dangerous countries to work in as a journalist. 121 journalists were killed since 2000, according to organizations like Artículo 19. Also, 106 murders of social leaders have been documented.
The body of Bohem Jean has arrived to St. Lucia. He was shot by a police officer in Dallas, Texas in early September. His killing gathered nationwide attention in the U.S. and the world, sparking several protests. Bothem's mother, Allison Jean, expressed gratitude for the support of the people of St. Lucia.
Tragic loss for us. I still have not been able to come to grips with it, but I just want to extend appreciation to everyone, but to also ask that you respect our family's privacy. I ask that we do not sensationalize the situation, do not politicize the situation. I would like Botham to continue to be respected even in his death. So let's not get too over our heads.
Cuba is promoting a new state-owned policy aimed at promoting agriculture production. Authorities said the new measure will benefit farmers and will improve the supply of seeds and farm tools. The policy is expected to come into force next month.
The new regulations allow us to carry out more stable agricultural production. The new policy gives farmers great confidence in agriculture and agricultural sectors and encourages us to produce what we need. The country will reach a higher level of production and produce more types of vegetables, which is the goal we want to achieve.
Hundreds of workers in Ecuador have protested against the economic reconstructing plan promoted by President Lenin Moreno. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has the details from Quito.
Protesters are registering their frustration with government's austerity measures, including reduced fuel subsidies, which will see a rise in fuel costs. And with no increases in salaries, workers would have very little purchasing power. They're demanding changes to what they say is the authoritarian approach of those in power.
Today, we, the Ecuadorian working people, across social sectors, have taken the main streets of the country to tell President Moreno that it is time to rectify the economic measures because they are hurting the popular economy of the country.
Workers who took part in the nationwide demonstration say they feel disenfranchised.
They don't condone the poor's debt, but the rich are condoned. We, the working class, are not condoned. We are demanding equality for everyone.
Unions are also proposing that the new anti-corruption law is enforced. They're calling for the assembly to take control and legislate.
We want to make clear our rejection of the Lenin Moreno economic measures. It affects the poor man's pockets. We have made our proposals, but they haven't yet been acknowledged. The system must ensure that there are checks and balances against corruption. It must be weeded out at all levels.
Labor unions say they remain hopeful that consideration will be given to their recommendations. They say their aim is to move the country forward in the best interests of all, especially those who labor every day to ensure productivity.
China has opened its first embassy in the Dominican Republic. This comes almost 5 months after the two nations established diplomatic relations, following a severing of ties with Taiwan. The Dominican Republic, Panama, and El Salvador have also stopped recognizing Taiwan in the past 2 years. Victims of sexual abuse in Chile have demanded the expulsion of 6 priests from the Mary's congregation. The victims accused the priests of abusing them in their childhood when they were students in schools belonging to the group. They pretend to give a letter to the Mary's authorities, but they didn't turn up. The Mary's scandal exploded in 2017 when a priest admitted his abuse. El Salvador's President Salvador Sánchez Serén has thanked Cuba for supporting a literacy program. Over 300,000 people have learned to write and read thanks to this program. Sánchez Serén says Cuba's support has been key for its success. The 4th edition of the Havana Film Festival is preparing to take place in December. This year, the aesthetic of filmmakers from the region will be a tribute.
Entering the home of renowned Cuban filmmaker Gerardo Chijona allows cinema fans to review his extensive work. More than 8 of his films are exhibited in the Festival of the New Latin American Cinema. He has taken part in the festival since it first began in December 1979.
We wanted to have a festival for the Cuban audience. At that time, it was named the New Cinema, which I think it is something that needs to be reviewed. There are new movies, but as two movements, I feel that it no longer has the coherence it had before. For the filmmakers that come from abroad, to have that contact with filmmakers and to see the reaction of the Cuban audience is important.
Every year, the Havana Film Festival is the place to be to enjoy the best movies that are produced around the world, but especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. Its organizers want this year's edition to be focused on the aesthetics of the filmmakers that first promoted the festival.
This festival will celebrate the 40 years of Tomás Gutiérrez Alea. He was a paradigmatic filmmaker, not only in Cuba, but in Latin American and world as well. There will be a discussion panel dedicated to his work.
Film critics consider that the Havana Film Festival has left a footprint in the cinema world, showing the problems that the region faces.
Topics have changed with time. I remember in the 70s, the topics in the film focused on the dictatorships and the social movements. But from the 90s, films have shown new topics.
The festival has the challenge to attract a new audience with a special aesthetic in a world where cinema consumption has changed as new technologies continue to develop.
Authorities in Peru have recovered almost 2,000 pre-Hispanic artifacts that were stolen from the country. Many of these treasures were made out of ceramics, textiles, stones, and wood. Artifacts were repatriated from Australia, the United Kingdom, and Holland. A museum dedicated to the late Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar has been shut down in Medellin. Authorities said the museum was not granted the necessary authorization to offer tourism services or conduct commercial activities. The museum showed the eccentric life of Escobar, also known as the King of Cocaine. It was owned by Escobar's brother, Roberto. We'll take a short break now. World News is next. Welcome back. 218 people have died after a ferry sank on Lake Victoria in Tanzania. Authorities have reported that there are 41 survivors. The boat sank just a few meters from the dock, reportedly carrying more than 300 people. Accurate numbers are hard to get because the crew were drowned and the passengers' records were lost. Meanwhile, President John Magufuli has ordered the arrest of those responsible for the accident. In a televised address, Magufuli said the captain was not on board at the time of the accident. He explained control of the ferry was left to someone who was not properly trained. Human rights activists have accused Cameroon's military of killing 7 civilians. Authority activists claim the victims were shot by security forces in the Kumbo region, accused of being members of armed separatist fighters. Dozens of civilians and security forces have been killed in the conflict between the military and pro-independence fighters as the Anglophone crisis deepens. South Sudan President Salva Kiir has met with leaders of the opposition to discuss the implementation of the peace agreement. The meeting focused on finding a way of implementing a ceasefire and avoid any violations during the implementation period. Former Vice President and opposition leader Riek Machar will attend the peace ceremony that is being organized by the government. People in Mali are celebrating the 58th anniversary of independence from France. The main commemorative events have been held in the capital of Bamako. Mali gained independence from France in 1960. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta said during a ceremony to do more during his second term in office.
Men and women of Mali are not asking for a welfare state. They want a government that is attentive to help relieve their social distress and guarantee the access to basic social services to the most modest citizens. Some efforts have been made during my first mandate to meet those needs, but for the next 5 years, we have the obligation to do more and better.
The Vatican and China have signed a historic agreement on the appointment of Roman Catholic bishops. The preliminary accord gives the Vatican a say in the naming of bishops and grants the Pope veto power over candidates. This agreement could pave the way for the normalization of the ties between the Catholic Church and the Asian country. There are almost 12 million Catholics in China.
To the Catholic community in China, the bishops, priests, religious and faithful, the Pope entrusts above all the commitment to make concrete fraternal gestures of reconciliation among themselves, and so to overcome past misunderstanding, past tension, even the recent ones.
Beer is about to engulf the German city of Munich. A traditional parade has marked the start of the 185th Oktoberfest this Saturday. Young women led the parade, followed by the figure from the city's coat of arms, brewery owners, their employees, and special guests. 6 million people are expected to attend this event. Indian authorities have ordered the release of Delhi's last 6 street elephants into the wild. After years of push from animal rights activists, the elephants will be seized from their owners. The Indian capital housed more than 200 elephants 50 years ago, but with cars overflowing the city, conditions are no longer suitable for them. We come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.